Hi everybody, it's Julianne Lee from Beast Apothecary, and I'm going to start this off because introducing a couple of my animals, because we're doing this video from my farm in Nova Scotia. And this is Donald, and Donald lives in the house because she only has one leg, and she is she's become a house pet, but she can be very vocal and really loud. So if you hear some really weird noises, it's Donald. And it's happened a few times in a few videos, and I'm like, oh, that's my duck Donald. And everyone's like, yeah, right. But so just to show you, this is Donald. And if I'm going to put her back, but if you heard some crazy sounds, then you'll know that it's actually her. And she's just calling me because she's bored or she wants attention. Okay, be right back. Okay, so Donald's back in bed, and now I'm going to try to attempt to talk to you about who I am and how I got here, and sort of will the real Julianne Lee step up. It's going to be hard to do it fast, and it's a long journey. It's like a 25-year, well, probably much longer than that, but the actual vet clinic and holistic medicine in animals has been a 25-year journey. I grew up on a pretty magical farm with probably the most amazing mother on the planet. She is a animal advocate beyond description, and she is still doing rescue work, and she will be 90 next November. She was one of the founders with Grace Hall of Adopt a Dog, Save a Life in Ontario. So I grew up with my whole life with, probably, because we lived on a farm, probably a minimum of 12 to 25 dogs. And with those dogs, my mom took the ones that no one else would take. And it's so cool because my mom, she also volunteered for the Children's Aid Society, and she would take all the children that no one else would take. They would flip the doors open with their feet. They would go to the washroom in the car, and my mom figured out a way to take them to all of their doctor's appointments and stuff, where sometimes, hours, she'd have to drive 5 hours to pick up these kids and then 5 hours to take them back to Toronto. And she would put them in the back seat. This was before seatbelts and stuff. And she would put them between, 2 Dobermans and a bunch of Dachshunds. And that's literally how she got them to be calm enough and feel secure and safe and loved enough that they would be okay to actually drive. And then she got to thinking, well, why we foster kids? Why can't children? Why don't we foster animals? Why do animals have to live in cages? So she was paramount in the whole beginning stages of actually fostering dogs. We lived, like I said, on a very large farm in Ontario, and my mom would sometimes disappear for a few days, and I always disappear in the house for a few days, and I always knew it was because she probably brought a dog in that we knew would die, and the local SPCAs and groups would call her in with ones that were in such desperate need that they couldn't get out, and they couldn't get out of either the SPCAs or the actual homes themselves. And my mom would take them and literally take them up into her bedroom and spend 2 full days with them, even if that meant just lying with them in the bed and hand feeding them, touching them, cuddling them, telling them how much they were loved, until we put them to sleep. And we would have the vet come to our house and euthanize them. And she would always say that the ones that would do amazing and bound around gave her great joy, but probably the biggest thing that gave her the most joy was being able to show an animal love once in their life before they died. So what I've done has come from a long line of true animal lovers, and I've dedicated my life absolutely to that. I don't have children, and my life is now at a farm, 90 acres in Nova Scotia, with more than 40 rescue animals and ducks that live in my house. And everything that's here were, on their way to either being donkeys going to the glue factory. The list goes on and on. So I rode competitively horses, and I was trying to make a decision on whether or not I wanted to go to school to become a vet, or I wanted to try and get something called my Canadian Amateur Champion, which hadn't been done yet in Canada. And I decided to do that. And I instead of going to vet school, and I did a animal health technician program and instead. And I lived in a very diverse family. My father was a really brilliant architect and very much more science-based. And my mom, we saw a naturopath when we were children. We weren't vaccinated, so my mom was much more on the holistic side. And my father used to describe me as a wild Yugoslavian gypsy when he was mad at me. But if he wasn't mad at me, it was an Irish, I don't know, some amazing Irish thing, because he was Irish. So I grew up in a very diverse culture. But when I went to school to become a tech, I have the utmost respect for scientists and veterinarians and people in the medical field, because I can tell you firsthand, when you want to do well in something and you have a passion for something, you can become, and I'm going to be really radical because this is about me and nothing about, what's right and wrong, but you can become easily brainwashed into believing in something so deeply because you want to do well. And if you challenge it and if you second guess it, how do you succeed? How do you graduate in something that you don't believe in? So before I went to vet tech school, we fed everything on our farm, real food. Nothing was vaccinated. Everything was treated through my mom's naturopath or my grandmother. And when I graduated, I started vaccinating everything. I started being upset with my grandma and my mom that they were feeding real food compared to dry kibble. I really, really jumped the fence over to the conventional side. And about 5 or 6 years into it, my mom and my grandma literally did sort of this intervention with me and sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Julie, we love you. We know that this is really what you should be doing, but since you've been doing it, everything's getting sick. Everything's getting sick." We had cats that were in their 30s, literally, and they would get, unfortunately, run over by a tractor because they were still in the fields mousing, but they were deaf. We would have large dogs living till they were 16, 17 years old. And they said that vets never really came unless they had to cast a leg or stitch up a wound or something like that. But since I'd been working with in this field, everything was getting sick, and they were right. But I was so stubborn, and I still am. I wouldn't listen to a word that they said, not a word, until the love of my life, dog Bruticus, developed cancer, and he was 4 years old. But moving up to that, I was a tech for a very, very large clinic, and I did a lot of the autopsies and biopsies, and we had large and small animal veterinarians and a staff of probably 25. And I started seeing the correlation. An animal would be vaccinated, and then 2 months later or 3 weeks later or whatever would start getting infected ears, infected eyes, diarrhea, vomiting, itchy skin. And I put blinkers on. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to hear it. I saw it. It was computing the whole time, but I ignored it. And then Brudy got cancer, and I was devastated. And I went hysterically to my mother, and my mom said, "Go see Virginia." And Virginia was our herbalist and our naturopath that we all saw. And she said, "Take Rudy to see Virginia," and I did. And was the first time I heard stop feeding, not first time I heard, but first thing, get him off the kibble. Second thing, take him to see the oncologist, because I wasn't going to do what they wanted me to do at the clinic that I was working at, and get a second opinion, see what they say. Don't let them do biopsies. Don't let them stick needles in them. Don't let them just go and have the diagnostics of what's actually there. So that's what I did, and but before I went, it was in his colon, and she started making suppositories for him, and we were giving him SEACT, and poor dog was running from me left, right, and center, and we were treating him for about 2 weeks, because that's how long it took before I could get into Mississauga, which is where the referral clinic was, and I took him down. They told me that it was quite intrusive, and that it was going to probably have to have resection done, and the prognosis was really guarded. So I brought him back, and again, we couldn't get him back in for another 2 weeks, and we continued the treatment. And by the time I took him back, I actually got a hotel down there, because they thought he'd be hospitalized for about 5 to 7 days. And they called me the same day after the surgery and said, "We don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, keep doing it." And Dr. Smith was the vet at the time. He just said he's never seen anything like it. It went from the size of a small egg to the size of a grape. And instead of being really invasive, it was very contained and encapsulated, and they didn't have to resect anything. They were able to remove it. And his prognosis went from very guarded to much better. Well, that started everything. I quit my job. I decided that I didn't want to do conventional medicine. And in fact, I was in a place I didn't want to do really anything with animals. So I went back to Humber College, and I got I did a program at Humber College called Equine Animal Science, and I wound up working with a fertility vet doing ultrasounds. And when I saw even that, the extent that what they did to horses to try to get them pregnant, I was just at the point where I just couldn't stand it anymore. I just didn't want to be in this field at all. I wanted to do something in the human natural field. So when Broody recovered completely, I went to Spain to visit my girlfriend, and I got sick in Spain. And I got sick with something that I used to get all the time when I showed and when I was really stressed, which was like a hemorrhagic gastritis. And I would be sick for a long time, and a week to 10 days, and like on my back in bed. So I was very disappointed, because I thought it was going to ruin my trip. And her boyfriend spoke fluent Spanish, and when I was there, the first doctor said to me, "What's going on?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, is this a reoccurring thing?" And I said, "Yes," and through this translation, and he said, "Are you stressed?" And I said, "Yes, I'm very stressed." And he said, "Just a second." So he went and got another doctor, came back, and started asking me stuff about my dreams and about all kinds of crazy stuff. And I thought, oh my God, just get me back to Canada. I'm going to what does my dreams have to do with my bloody diarrhea? Anyway, so I was quite worried, but he was a homeopath. And he treated me, and within 2 days, I was backpacking throughout Spain. And I was completely blown away. And things happen for reasons. And when I got back to Canada, I started researching homeopathy, because I had made my decision that I wanted to be a homeopath. But all the courses, all the English-speaking courses that were, longer than 4 weekends or a weekend course, were all in predominantly in Britain. There was lots of good ones in France and in Spain and stuff, but the English-speaking ones were just in Britain. And I was really perplexed, because back then, I would have had to put everything in quarantine, and there's no way I was leaving my animals behind. So I would have had to put everything in quarantine, and I was really, really worried about that. But just before I had to make my decision, they contacted me and said one of the professors had started a course in Vancouver. So I flew out, I got my interview, and literally within 3 months was driving from Toronto to BC with a horse trailer and a bunch of dogs and cats. And 2 days into the course, I drove my professors crazy and about animals, because I started listening to it thinking, okay, I'm going to do people. But the second I started learning, I just thought, oh my gosh, this could help this and this could help that, and I could do this and I could do that. So finally my one prof that was a medical doctor from Germany said, Julie, you're driving me crazy. Why don't you just do animals? And I said, well, a couple reasons. One, because I can't, because I'm not a veterinarian. Two, because all the courses for veterinarians, I don't feel are long enough courses. They're 4-weekend courses. This is a 4-year course that I was in for people. He said, well, then you need to go to the British Homeopathic Veterinary Surgeons program in England. And I said, well, I would love to, but I can't because I'm not a vet. So because of my history of having my equine science degree and having my vet tech program, again, I've just been so blessed in my life that he actually got me to go to England. And what I did is I would go to school till September. And then I would finish school in May. I'd get on a plane. I would fly to England. I worked with Sue Armstrong and with John Saxton and Chris Day and all the great guys. And I did that every single year for 5 years. And then I would fly back to Vancouver quickly to get back to my school in September. And after I did that, after I graduated with them and did my whole practicum with them, then I went with them I was so lucky, I went with them with summer schools. I went to Greece with them, to George Viltoukis, and did a summer school program. I went to Rajan Sankaran and did a summer program in India. And they just basically took me under their wing and treated me with such grace and compassion and taught me everything that they knew and allowed me to do everything that I needed to do to get the confidence to practice. So when I came back is when my struggles really started happening. I had met an amazing veterinarian, Dr. David Roosh, and he contacted me because he knew what I was doing. I was doing like sort of house call practices, and he had taken a homeopathic veterinary course and didn't feel confident really in practicing, so he wanted to come with me. So that started a very long 15-year journey between the two of us and an amazing friendship. And he is, without a doubt, one of the most brilliant veterinarians I've ever met in my life. And we opened a little clinic called Natural Animal Health Services. And the Vet Association came down on us with a sledgehammer, told us that we couldn't do it, told us that what we were doing was illegal, told us, the list goes on and on and on. So they said, you have to become a vet clinic. And we said, okay, we don't really want to become a vet clinic, but if we have to, we will. So what do? Well, they wanted us to buy a bunch of drugs and do a bunch of surgeries. And we're like, no, we're not doing that. We are going to open this clinic. And the heat started rising. So Dave, because he had his vet license, and he kind of supported me 100 million%, but he stepped back, and then I stepped forward into the very difficult procedure of opening the first licensed holistic vet clinic in Canada, which meant no drugs, which meant no surgery, which meant diagnostics, yes, being able to do blood work. We would send out our x-rays to other clinics and then read them ourselves at the clinic. It was difficult. Back then, we weren't even allowed to have the word natural in it. We had to have it. They wanted us to be called Broadway Veterinary Hospital. And we said, no, we're not doing that, because we don't want a hit by car coming in expecting us to be able to do all of this emergency stuff and not be able to. We really just wanted to be more of a referral, second opinion, holistic practice. So I put in probably 20 different names. They turned every single name down. I couldn't use integrative. I couldn't use holistic. I couldn't use natural. I couldn't use any of that back then. And you can tell this was in 1994 that this whole thing sort of started. And then it heated up in 98. And then I actually got my license in 2000. But at the end, I was like, I'm just not going to call myself Broadway Veterinary Clinic. So I started feeling like, what do I feel about animals? Like, what do I really feel? And it's like, I love them. I dedicate my life to them. And a friend of mine had bought me a book called About Love. And it had a whole chapter about the love of animals. And it was called Our Beasts Adored. And I read it and I was like, that's what I want to call my clinic, Adored Beast, because that's exactly how I feel. So I put it into the Vet Association and they turned it down because they said that they thought the word beast would be offensive and that people would find it offensive. So I laughed and said, then awesome, give it to me because then no one will come and you guys will be happy. So I wound up getting it and it's just been history since then. And I had a little discussion with them in a way. They sent in a private investigator. And because I told the person that they shouldn't, until Dr. Roosh could see the dog, that they shouldn't be running the dog. The dog came in for a limping issue and wasn't going to be able to see the vet till the next day. They fully knew I couldn't prescribe for them until the vet actually looked at them. But at the end, I said to them, if you're running him on pavement, I would not do that until Dr. Roosh can see him tomorrow. And within 5 days, I had a practicing medicine without a license lawsuit slapped on me. And then the fight really began. So I spent a lot of money. I had to second mortgage my house. I basically got a divorce because it was so stressful. That Irish gypsy stubbornness came through beyond imaginable because I thought I've done everything, jumped through every single hoop, done everything that everybody wanted me to do, and then you do this. So at that point, I already had 1,000 clients. I was already tiny little clinic, but probably had one of the largest clienteles in BC. So I decided to go for it, and we wound up settling out of court and creating a scenario where indeed I owned the first licensed holistic clinic, and indeed I did see clients and do health plans and do the remedies, and Dr. Roosh was my designated veterinarian, and we had this amazing, synergistic, awesome relationship. And we had to move because we got so big that people didn't want us they didn't want us sending them somewhere else. So then I partnered with another veterinarian and opened a 7,000 square foot clinic with a rehab center and full surgery and ultrasound. And then I started teaching we held it at UBC. We did a postgraduate 3-year homeopathic medicine program. I brought in all the profs from the UK and graduated I don't know how many veterinarians from this 3-year program. Dr. Roosh and I sat down and were the pioneers in the forefront of creating, with Dr. Sally Lester at the laboratory in Vancouver, the first Canadian titer tests, because up until our clinic started, we had to send them to the States. So it's been a long road for me. I wound up writing for the Vancouver Sun holistic column once a week, and it was just every single week I had to say, well, probiotics aren't actually proven to help animals. And I mean, the list went on of the amount of time that they tried to basically discredit me and make it seem like I didn't know anything. And then I started lecturing at vet conferences, and then the list goes on and on, but at the end of the day, it was the best thing that ever happened. The best thing that ever happened to me. At the time, it was hard. It was really hard because I was working. I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like I said, I completely dedicated my life to it. And there were lots of times that I felt victimized and I felt like it was really unfair. But when I look back and I see what happened by me opening this clinic and by being able to actually have to. It's funny, when they introduce me at vet conferences, the thing they're most proud of is that I don't have the ability, even though we could prescribe drugs, and I worked very closely with the reduction of drugs and looking at x-rays and doing all of that. They were the most proud of me because I had treated close to 30,000 animals, and I had to do it through holistic ways because that's the way, that's what I was trained to do. And at one point I actually felt like going back because I was so discouraged, and going back and becoming a vet, and the holistic vet that I respect the most in the whole planet is Dr. Susan Armstrong in Britain. And when I spoke to her and asked her for my if I should do that, she said to me, "Julie, how could you do that? Knowing what you know and doing what you've done, how could you go back to school and hear about vaccinating animals and why we should be vaccinating them? And how can you do that if you have that much money and that much time to dedicate yourself, become a better homeopath?" And basically that's what I did. I traveled all throughout the world and went to saw things that were treated, like we talk about confidence in holistic medicine. When I went to India and I saw things like syphilis and tuberculosis and things that we would just be like, I was even going, oh my God, where's the IV antibiotics? Being healed by homeopathy, it gave me the confidence to do things that I probably wouldn't have done. So things turned out amazing, and I was able to, like I said, have a full functioning veterinary hospital with surgeries and support the animals post and pre and post with holistic medicine, and decrease drugs and triturate drugs and do all of that stuff with the support of all of these amazing veterinarians. So that's kind of who I am, how I got here. And when I started, people thought I flew in on a broom. There wasn't one single raw dog food company in Canada out there manufacturing raw dog food. I had to tell people how to make it. When I would tell people don't vaccinate and do titers, they thought I had 4 heads. I was paramount in starting the first commercially raw food dog food in Canada. So I've been blessed, and I've been really lucky to be able to have the experience and the knowledge and just literally the amount of animals that I've learned through to create the formulas that I did in my clinic. And like I said, when I started, people thought I flew in on a broom. And when I left Vancouver, I felt like they went from like no holistic vet clinics to 25 holistic vet clinics. And I felt like I was leaving Vancouver in really amazing hands, and that I could now work on a much bigger level and try to educate the public even more and support the people out there that want to change how animals, not just how animals are. What I really want to do is I want to change the way that we're looking at animal health care, from what does it mean to do so many diagnostics on your animal that it turns into a lab rat. Where's that? I'm not saying that it's not good to have some diagnostics and science-based stuff, but it's like somebody in this field, which is starting more and more, thank God, with the internet. It's like I want to try and change the way the world looks at animal health care, and from a much more ethical point of view, not just from a holistic view, but that encompasses everything. Hahnemann used to say, above all, do no harm, and that's pretty much my saying with everything in life. So that was a very long video, and for those of you that are still listening, thank you very much.